So I had a long conversation with Destiny about Palestine and Israel. And within just a few minutes of hearing him speak, I realized that Nathan Robinson's description of him as having sub-Wikipedia level knowledge on the issue was actually too generous of Nathan. And what's remarkable is that even though Destiny was clearly out of his depth, that did not shake his confidence one bit. He projected authority by ridiculing the facts I was bringing up, even though he had absolutely no clue what he was talking about.
So to be clear, you're saying before that, you're saying that the Israeli official policy was to use human shields. That was codified in the military doctrine.
That is official.
It's so
policy.
crazy that they say that, yet the only image I've ever seen of the human shield is that one boy on the Jeep that gets posted 50 billion times over and over again, but okay.
But confidently dismissing facts doesn't change that they're true. Here is a BBC News article about how when the Israeli Supreme Court banned the Israeli military from using Palestinian civilians as human shields, the Israeli military establishment and the defense minister protested that ban because it was useful for them as a matter of policy. And that practice continues even after the ban. Destiny also claimed that Amnesty International had accused Hamas of using civilians as human shields in 2014. And
do you also acknowledge that they say that, for instance, like Hamas uses human shields?
Yes.
Amnesty International says that?
They do not. What human rights organizations accuse Hamas of, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, is the fact that they operate in civilian areas and hide in civilian areas which endanger civilians. They acknowledge that much. That is not the legal definition of human shield.
That is the legal definition.
I know what human rights organizations document.
Well, yes, you don't. You didn't know that in 2014, Amnesty International said that Hamas was using human shields. So
again, you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, well, I've actually read the reports. You should try it sometime.
Well, let's look at the Amnesty reports of 2014. Addressing Israel's claims of human shields during the assault, Amnesty International said they have no evidence that Palestinian civilians were intentionally being used as human shields. After the assault, they issued another report saying that even though Hamas's conduct endangered civilians, it did not necessarily amount to using human shields. But more surprising was that Destiny did not have a basic understanding of the core issues in Palestine and Israel. He didn't even understand that Israel's entire presence in the West Bank is considered a military occupation that Israel was obligated to end, and that every last settlement that Israel built in the West Bank is considered illegal under international law. I think we're missing the forest for the trees here. The idea is Israel's presence in the West Bank is illegal. They have to leave.
Whether something is legal or illegal is not really at issue here. Like everything here, the legality of all of this is.
And when he did not like what international law has to say, he manufactured complexity and ambiguity where there was none. The entire international human rights consensus and international law consensus on this, which is that Israel's occupation and settlements and wall in the West Bank are absolutely and categorically illegal. I would like to touch on a couple of other
the legality question here. First of all, when we're citing like human rights organizations or UN General Assembly, like all the UN General Assembly resolutions are non-binding. When you look at like a resolution like 242, it doesn't even really make sense.
Well, first of all, UN Resolution 242 is not a General Assembly resolution. It's a Security Council resolution, and those are legally binding. And second, what does it make sense about it? It's actually pretty straightforward. It cites the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war on calls on Israel to withdraw from the occupied territories. But deflecting was Destiny's weapon of choice. Whenever he would recognize that he was losing the argument, he would either try to change the topic.
Why is it that Jordan doesn't seem to care about the border controls? Could it have to do with the fact that in 1970, the PLO and Arafat literally tried to kill the Jordanian king?
Or he would dive into a level of detail that's just completely pointless, and either you chase him down that rabbit hole and lose the point you're trying to make, or else he would cleverly accuse you of not wanting to engage the details, allegedly because you're uninformed. 13,000
to 14,000 new housing units were constructed every single year. And then I think it was from 94 or 93 to, I think it was to 97, that number was like less than 5,000. It was only new housing units that were being constructed.
I mean, just for clarity's sake, I feel like we can get into the weeds on this.
I want to get into the weeds. That's where I want to go, yeah.
Yeah.
We can go very into the weeds. I think it's very important to get into the weeds on this.
So even in places
I know that you keep saying that. This is hilarious. They don't want to get lost in the weeds. They don't want to deal with the history. You just don't know the facts.
Now, if you want to know the exact number of how many thousands of housing units Israel built in settlements, or how many new settlements, or how many new outposts, you can just go to Peace Now's website and see it all broken down in charts. But none of it changes the fact that all of this construction is illegal, and all of it is an infringement on Palestinians' right to their land. And another tactic he used is whenever he could not defend Israel's indefensible policies, he would crack jokes. Did you know that at the beginning of the blockade, potato chips were not allowed in? Sodas were not allowed in? Cookies were not allowed in? Can you explain to me what threat cookies pose to Israel from your perspective?
Well, if they're the Keebler Elf ones, it's like 200 calories a cookie, so maybe they just didn't want people getting fat.
But the most interesting exchange was about me accurately quoting Israeli Foreign Minister Shlomo Ben-Ami when he said that had he been Palestinian, he would not have accepted Israel's offer at Camp David II.
Camp David was not the missed opportunity for the Palestinians, and if I were a Palestinian, I would have rejected Camp David as well. This is something I put in the book.
The quote from the debate is extremely clear and straightforward. But in a desperate attempt to deflect, Destiny says that instead of believing your eyes and ears, what you should do is go read the book so that you would understand that the quote actually means something else.
People accuse me of not knowing anything about this topic, but then I understand when you're debating things like this, you don't know anything about the topic. And that's why you get upset when you talk about like getting in the weeds. Even that quote that you gave earlier from the Israeli foreign minister about how like I wouldn't have accepted the deal if I was a Palestinian at the time. That's not what he said. That's not what that quote says. And if you actually go to the book and you actually read the passage where he talks about it, what he said was that conditions were not right at the time for Palestinians to feel like they could accept that deal.
Now, the bad news for Destiny is I didn't just read the book. I took meticulous notes because I was working on my master's thesis on this subject when this book came out. And sure enough, what he claims about Camp David simply isn't there. Now, this is where it gets really funny. Destiny further embarrasses himself by tweeting a video at me made by one of his clueless followers mocking me because he thought that it proved me wrong about this quote. Check it out.
I think it's important to engage in good faith and to know what you're talking about and to not say things that you don't understand. I've watched that debate with Israel's foreign minister on more than one occasion. What he was saying is that the deal that was offered to Palestinians at the end of Camp David was a bad deal, and if he were Palestinian, he would not have accepted it. And
that's literally not what he said. If you watch the debate, and I watched that debate, it was literally hosted on Democracy Now!, and he's quoting his own book. And if you go back and read the book instead of just watching a YouTube video, you'll see the context of what was given. And what was given was that
we'll make that available. I'm glad you're saying that. I think we're going to be able to clip this up. I'm going to clip up that part of the debate. We'll put it up there with the quotes of the book, which I have sitting on my shelf. I'm happy to do all of this.
And that's pretty cute, but the problem is that the confused person who made this video grabbed book quotes not about the Camp David offer that I was referencing, but about a different set of negotiations at Taba. And the reason why that distinction is really important is because the Camp David offer that I referenced and that Ben-Ami said he would not accept had he been Palestinian happened in the summer of 2000, several months before the Intifada. Whereas the harsh conditions being referenced in the book here in this video talk about conditions being created by the Intifada that made future negotiations and an agreement more difficult for Palestinians to accept. So those conditions could not have possibly been in reference to the Camp David offer that Ben-Ami was talking about in this quote, because the Intifada had not happened yet. And yet, Destiny is so clueless that he just doubled down on his obvious error. And he's such a grifter that he even tried to take credit for having guessed what interview I got this Ben-Ami quote from, even though I had already mentioned the source when I first shared the quote with him. And by the way, if Destiny knows Ben-Ami's book so well, he probably would have noticed that in it, Ben-Ami proves almost every argument that Destiny himself spent our entire debate trying to deny. And what's remarkable is that there is a cult-like quality to social media today that is immune to counter-evidence. Whether it's Destiny or Alex Jones, or any other grifter who gains prominence by peddling nonsense to a large and loyal fan base, it really highlights that we're in a post-truth environment. It's why even someone like Lex Friedman, in a well-meaning attempt to enhance understanding about Palestine and Israel, finds himself trying to host a debate between actual experts, like Mu'in Rabbani and Norman Finkelstein on one hand, and then a clueless YouTuber like Destiny being thrown in the mix. Because grifters are actually good at sounding like they know what they're talking about. And it takes real knowledge and effort to tell experts and charlatans apart.